podcast. Joining me now, right beside me here indeed, is Ivor Casey. Ivor is the writer of a new book, Elvis and Ireland. Am I pronouncing that right, Ivor?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Ivor, great to have you in the programme. Obviously, no problem. Obviously, from the name, it is about Elvis.
Yes.
And you're quite young to be right. I think self-styled on your blog. Possibly, and you're saying like Cars are probably the youngest biographer of Elvis.
Probably
I would
so.
say. And we'll go with that. We're all for that. We're all for that. Elvis and Ireland. Firstly, I suppose, straightforward question. What is this book about?
Basically, well, what I've decided to do here is that I'm writing about Elvis Presley from, about his life and career, but with a whole new perspective, which is the Irish point of view, how Elvis had an influence. Because we often have been told that, Elvis had an influence around the world.
Yes.
But everything's usually told from an America-centric point of view about his life and career. So I thought, well, how exactly does he have an influence? And I might as well choose Ireland because I'm Irish, so I decided I'd trace back rock and roll, and the book discusses the evolution of rock and roll in Ireland and the influences that he had on Irish musicians.
I suppose any band worth its name is going to say, yeah, well, Elvis was a huge influence. But practically and tangibly, let's say we'll take some of the bands. So it's obviously mentioned Phil Lynott, U2. Tangibly, in your opinion, how did Elvis influence them? I've heard Bono talk about the showmanship as a frontman, Elvis, but in terms of musically or otherwise, how do you feel influence bands such as those?
Well, when it came to people like Rory Gallagher and Phil Lynott, well, you got to go back to the very start. The show bands were the first pop music groups in Ireland, and out of them, came the beat groups and Rory Gallagher, and then eventually people like Phil Lynott, and then we got to U2, who became the pinnacle of rock and roll. Phil Lynott, it's been quoted, and I scanned all the newspapers, going back to the 50s, every major newspaper, and I found interviews from people like Rory Gallagher and Phil Lynott who stated, how much of an influence they cited him as the main influence on their careers. Phil Lynott, even said to a friend in one of the documentaries I came across, was that he even wanted to burn out like Elvis Presley, so even the downside of Elvis seemed to have an effect on him. And
really, that was that kind of burnout, fade away kind of thing. I suppose you look forward to Kurt Cobain and all.
Well, that kind of thing, the newer generations probably might look to Kurt Cobain, as that kind of tragic kind of figure in music. And Phil Lynott, on the night of Elvis's death, apparently locked himself in his room, indulged in bottles of wine, and played his old Elvis records.
Really?
And then a few years later, a lot of Thin Lizzy fans will know that he wrote and recorded a song called King's Call, which was a tribute to Elvis.
I suppose when we see the book Elvis in Ireland, people go, Elvis, did he come to Ireland? Is this an unveiling of Elvis, perhaps like John Paul II? But of course he never performed in Europe anywhere.
No, he didn't. No. He only came to Europe once in 1958. He was in the army. He was stationed in Germany. Took a trip to Paris on a 2-week break, and then when he was flying back to America, they stopped in Prestwick Airport in Scotland, but unfortunately didn't stop in Ireland. The closest he got would probably be flying above the Donegal Hills or something as the plane went to America. But
it's close enough for a lot of people. I know it's not. Well, he was in Donegal technically. He's a hugely interesting person. How long have you been compiling this book? How long has this project been taking?
Well, I started the idea 10 years ago, although it didn't take 10 years to write now. The idea, I suppose, was conceived 10 years ago. I was going to do the Leaving Cert at the time, and a lot of people knew what they were going to do. They were going to go follow in a family business, or they were going to go to college, or they just knew what... everybody seemed to know what they wanted to do, and I liked writing, and I liked Elvis, so I thought I'd put the two together, and I came up with the idea for the book, and... But then I got sidetracked, went into doing a bit of freelance journalism. Then I went back to college as a mature student, and last year I finished and decided I might as well just finish it off, that book. Well, Elvis took
a big hiatus, of course. You're remodeling his career, of course. He took it when he went to the army, because he came back with that famous special.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Are you a big fan of his music? Do you play his music?
Well, there was a time when I would have been more of a really, I guess I went through fanboy devotion. You say, between the ages of 13 to 18 or something. I was 13 years old when I discovered Elvis, and I was captivated by his charisma. They were showing a whole evening of programs devoted to him on the 20th anniversary of his death, and I was just captivated by that evening, and I took a big interest then. I bought loads of CDs, but looking at it now, I kind of stood back and took it from a more objective point of view.
in terms of as a journalist and looking.
That's right. Yeah, trying to just stand back and see the warts and all kind of story of Elvis.
And there was many, like it was a sad story in many ways. Elvis's story.
Well, the story, the ending is very tragic. The last few years of his life, we have that image of him becoming overweight when he had been in fantastic shape for most of his life. It was just the last 2 years he suddenly just put on lots of weight and did all those prescription drugs But he became a tragic figure because he just became consumed by the whole mess that is stardom, and it was very, very sad. And then when he divorced his wife, when he separated from his wife, that just seemed to be the ending for him. When you see his music as well, his catalogue of music, it's all very, very depressing and sad. And
from that point on,
until his death. Then.
In terms, and I know it wasn't your book that discovered, it was timely because there is this. Only a couple of weeks ago, we heard that Elvis has parentage, I suppose, or relatives in Carlow and Hackettstown. I know it's not your book, but it's interesting the time of your book coming out. So there is a timely influence in that.
That's right. Yeah.
You started your own. You printed and published yourself, which is an interesting story in itself. For you, young guy, freelance journalist, it's difficult out there at the moment, I presume, to get stuff published.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it was very difficult. I submitted the idea around to a bunch of publishers throughout the years, occasionally, and I just, as so many writers, got that rejection letter, and then during college, I put the book aside and I said, I'll just do it myself. I'll just publish myself. There's a lot of people are going into self-publishing now, and
is that difficult? I mean, is it cost? I'm sure there's an awful lot of people out there. I have something written in it. Just
there's different methods of doing it. You can go with the companies that will help you self-publish, and if you want to actually do everything yourself, it can be more costly and more of a risk because you got to get the software, you got to get all the programs to do it, and then you got to learn. It's very complicated. You got to be computer wise, to figure out how to format text and all that kind of stuff.
So it must give you great joy though when you walk by a bookshop.
Yeah,
and you see, there is my work.
I know, that's nice. Yeah,
and it's in all good bookshops.
Well, at the moment, it's just in Tower Records on Wycliffe Street and Celtic Note on Nassau Street. But Easton's have got a batch
their
now.
bookshop. They've actually really the stuff they have. They don't do a lot of books.
No,
so they'll tell you. You have to be. It has to be a really good book to get a listen to it. I know that from friends who've tried to get books and stuff. So that must make you very, very satisfied. I mean, 10 years, as you say, this has been an idea. You have the hardback version in front of you. They're paperback, should I say? But it's a physical, tangible thing. So that must be very rewarding for you as a person.
Oh yeah, but it is. Yeah, like I as I said, when I started 10 years ago, I kind of thought this book would be done in a year or something. I thought it'd be out within a year. I had written the first draft in less than 10 months, so I thought a few reworks on it and it won't be too long. But because of all the rejections and so many other things getting in the way, finally it's happy. I'm quite happy to have it.
And it's a nice book in terms of and the way I like to read books like this, and I've lived through bits of it. You can put it down and come back to it. It's not something you have to read like Lord of the Rings. Obviously, you can. I enjoyed that chapter, and maybe a day or two later you can go back and you can refresh. It's a book you can read over and enjoy it over a period of time.
Yeah, like the story is told in chronological order as well. The story of Elvis's life from beginning from the birth to his death.
Yeah,
and it picks up the Irish connections along that journey. So.
Had he, in terms of Irish connections, was there any of his entourage or management, or was there Irish connections there? You would imagine them.
No, there isn't anything there. It's mainly just the genealogy. There was what you mentioned there earlier about Carlo. There's actually even further links than that. That story was about his father's side, but on his mother's side, which has kind of been documented for over 20 years, is that the family started in France, they moved up to Scotland, multiplied in Ireland, and then they moved over.
As most people in Ireland do, yeah.
and then they moved over to America, where they were known as the Scots-Irish, and that family name was Mansell, and then throughout marriage and things, eventually the Presley name came in. And
I've never seen, speaking of parentage and generations, a daughter who has such physical similarities to her dad. When you see Lisa Marie Presley and she's back singing stuff like that,
that's great.
That was an important part of his life, I'm sure too. Do we get a sense of how he was as a dad? Do we know? I suppose with the lifestyle he was leading, it was probably quite difficult, I'm sure.
Well, apparently he spoiled her an awful lot from the stories I've read now. Priscilla, the mother, was more, she'd be more the conservative kind of mother, but Elvis was the flip side, he was the star, and he spoiled, like he bought her fur coats and all that kind of stuff, when it was acceptable to buy fur coats, back in the 70s. And apparently he spoiled her and just took her out on he used to rent out fairgrounds for her and her friends, you know. And
he was type. I've watched a few documentaries behind the scenes of Elvis, and he was quite the messer now. And you know, there was a lot of stuff. There is this idea of Elvis and hardcore purist fans of Elvis, but he was a bit of a lad's lad as well. Like, you know, there was, you know, a bit of shenanigans going on, shall we just say, involving the ladies.
That's well, he
hard not, I suppose, you're in that position.
Well, I'd say it was very difficult in his position to stay monogamous. You know,
I don't think he did.
No, he certainly didn't. No, there was an enormous amount of groupies, and he just had women throwing themselves at him, though. You know, for like all the time. Like, you know, I don't know how he would have.
Well, it's not easy. I reckon it's not easy. I find it difficult. Yeah. But he was the first of those huge. I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan, and Johnny Cash had a huge level, and that the Sun Records people, I love a lot of those. But when you look at like Niall Horan from One Directions in the UK, because his brother's wedding was practically spoilt by the level of fan intrusion. But Elvis really was the first to have such mania of fans, like you know, and probably the Beatles afterwards. But that type of level of intrusion, and like his life was practically ruined, really, in a sense, wasn't it? But
that's for sure. Like when he became an international star at age 21. I suppose they're younger. They're even getting younger than that nowadays. But then it was considered extremely young to be a big star. And as soon as he signed his life away when
really,
there was just, and he worked non-stop till the day he died. And I think that kind of intrusion affected him deeply. He became very reclusive in his last few years because he just felt he couldn't go outside without being mobbed. And
in many ways, it was an awful life. For many ways,
it's an awful life. When you people see the wealth and the glamour and just being able to buy anything and being adored, but there is that tragic side to that kind of that level of wealth and power, and it's the downside of capitalism.
I think I remember reading a quote where he actually one time put his hands up to heaven and go, "Why, God, did you choose me?" Kind of thing. A bit like Jesus, I suppose, but modern day. I suppose martyr really to the fans. It's a really interesting book. Have you ideas of what you'd like to do next? When you finish a project like this, I suppose it consumes you so much. I know you're a freelance journalist, and that in itself is a difficult old trade at the moment. And my hat goes off to anyone who's doing that. It's difficult. But is there an idea? Have you an idea for? Because I know you write for, amongst other things, the Sun Independent. You've wrote for them in the past on arts and music and entertainment. Is there another project that's on the horizon?
I do have an idea. Yeah, it's completely separate now. Like this is the Elvis book done, and that's. That was one of my passionate interests was Elvis, and I'm glad to have been able to put that out there. But I have ideas for fiction and creative writing that I want to do, and it's something completely different to non-fiction music.
We shall stay tuned. And would you be interested in? And I was just talking to Sabrina, who says she likes to watch movies that wouldn't necessarily out of her comfort zone. Would you like to, as a writer, pick a subject that you really no interest in? And then go and immerse yourself, almost like an actor, and immerse yourself and write about that kind of thing. Is that something that would appeal to you?
Well,
or you have to have a passion in it.
I find that I have to have an interest in what I'm writing about. I like to pick subjects that I write about, and I guess that's one of the difficulties of being a freelance journalist. Is that choosing what you want to write about is. It's one of the joys of writing. I love to sit back and write, and especially write about what I really am interested in, and discovering new things about that particular subject. If it comes down to having to write about things that I'm not too passionate about, I suppose maybe I would do it, but I do like to try when possible to immerse myself in what I like.
Well, just what's going off in my head is a documentary. I think it would be quite an interesting documentary, maybe, in featuring that. But Ivor, it's been great talking to you. I'm really impressed by the book itself, but the fact that you got out there yourself, and it's a prello. I'm pronouncing it. You're published, which is, you're telling me, is a Latin for
Latin word for to summon or to call.
I like it. I like it already. It's a great book, and fair play to you for getting it done. I know it's consumed you for a long time, but you can sit back now and have something tangible, which is great. Something we'd all love to have. We'll play a bit of Elvis. Ivor Casey. The book is Elvis and Ireland. It's in Tower Records and Celtic
Note.
Website, we can get info on you or books.
Well, on Amazon, it's available on Amazon.
Brilliant. So you can buy it on Amazon there, and hopefully, if people of Easton's and other bookshops are listening, get this stuff. A young Irish writer, publisher himself, get it on your shelves, sell some stuff. We'll want to promote Irish stuff, and it's a really good book as well. That's the most important thing. It's a really interesting read. Thanks a million for popping in, Ivor. We'll talk to you no doubt some other time.
That's great. Thank you, Ryan.
Here is the man himself.
We're caught in a trap.